My husband approached me right before the divorce hearing. Today is the best day of my life. I'm going to take everything from you. His mistress stood nearby, smiling viciously. My lawyer stepped up beside me. You did everything exactly as I asked? Yes. Then get ready for a show. For my husband, the divorce was about to turn into a nightmare. Aaliyah watched silently as Marcus threw a set of keys onto the kitchen table. The sound of metal hitting wood was sharp, but she didn't even flinch. Over the last 6 months, she had grown used to this one-man theater production. Marcus, her soon-to-be ex-husband, stood before her in an expensive suit, one she had picked out for him, adjusting a perfectly knotted tie. His eyes were full of triumph. He was confident, too confident. It all ends tomorrow, he spat out, not looking at her, but checking his reflection in the dark glass of the turned-off oven. I hope you packed your things. I'm not waiting for you to box up your rags after court. The condo is mine, we discussed this. Aaliyah slowly sipped her cold tea. She was 32 years old, but today she felt 100 years older, and simultaneously 100 years wiser. We didn't discuss anything, Marcus, she replied quietly. You talked, I listened. Those are two different things. Marcus chuckled. That signature smirk, which once seemed bold and attractive to her, now only triggered disgust. He was handsome in that glossy, manicured way of a successful sales manager. 35 years old, gym 3 times a week, fresh lineup at the barber shop every 2 weeks, and complete certainty that the world revolved around him. Aaliyah, don't be stupid, he said, turning to her and shaking his head condescendingly. I have a shark for a lawyer. You have some old man from a free legal clinic or wherever you dug him up. I earned the money. I paid the mortgage. You sat at home for the last 2 years playing housewife. Your contribution to this condo is 0. The court will leave you with nothing. I offered you $20,000 as a settlement. You refused. Now you won't even get that. He was lying. He lied so inspirationally that it seemed he believed his own words. Aaliyah knew the truth, but she stayed silent. Now was not the time for arguments. Crystal is waiting for me in the car, he threw over his shoulder, heading for the exit. We're going to celebrate early. Tomorrow, right after the hearing, we're moving in here, so clear out the walk-in closet. The door slammed. Aaliyah was left alone in the silence of the spacious kitchen. She looked around at the walls she had painted herself, the custom curtains she had ordered, the table where they once dreamed of having children. Marcus thought he knew everything about her. He considered her a quiet, boring bean counter who only knew how to reconcile debits and credits and bake pies. He forgot that an accountant is not just a calculator. An accountant is a person who sees the essence of things through numbers, who knows where things are hidden, how much was spent, and where it came from. And most importantly, an accountant never forgets. The silence in the apartment became dense, almost tangible. Aaliyah placed her cup on the table. Her hands didn't shake. The trembling, the despair, the pain, all that was left in the past 3 months ago, on that rainy Tuesday in November, that divided her life into before and after. That was the day her world, built on faith and illusions, collapsed, leaving behind only cold, sharp shards of truth. Back then, she still loved him, or at least she was convinced of her love. She lived in a cozy but fragile cocoon of trust, taking care of the home, taking freelance gigs remotely, and diligently creating comfort for her provider. Marcus would come home late, tired, smelling of expensive tobacco and other people's perfume, which he blamed on tense negotiations with female clients. Aaliyah believed him. It was easier to believe than to admit the obvious, than to destroy her world which seemed so solid. She closed her eyes to the small inconsistencies, his irritability, the lack of attention, writing it off as work stress. On that rainy day, she was simply planning to take his best suit to the dry cleaners, just a mundane chore she always took upon herself. Before putting the jacket in the bag, out of a habit developed over years of living together, she checked the pockets. Marcus was always leaving important business cards, flash drives, or keys in there, which she would then have to hunt for all over the apartment. In the inner breast pocket, her fingers felt a piece of thick paper folded into quarters. At first, she thought it was another business card. Aaliyah unfolded it. It was a receipt from a jewelry boutique called L'Éclat. Not some mall kiosk, but a high-end luxury retailer downtown. The date was yesterday. Time, 2:30 in the afternoon. The total amount forced her to sit down on the edge of the sofa. Her legs gave out. $5,000. Item description: gold bracelet with topaz, azure collection. Something inside her chest snapped. It felt like an invisible string, stretched to its limit, had burst with a deafening sound. Yesterday at 2:30, Marcus had sent her a text. Buried at work. Meeting with the CEO. Will be late. Don't wait up. He had promised that in the evening they would watch a new movie together. Instead, he was buying a bracelet. Her first impulse was to call, scream, demand explanations, throw the damned receipt in his face. But professional deformation took over. Aaliyah was an auditor by calling, even if she was currently working as a simple bookkeeper. Emotions are chaos. They prevent clear thinking. Numbers, those are order. Those are irrefutable evidence. She put down her phone to avoid doing anything stupid and walked over to her laptop. Her fingers tapped on the keys quickly and confidently. The age of social media is a terrible time for liars, she thought bitterly. Aaliyah knew that Marcus had a new assistant named Crystal D'Souza. He had mentioned her casually. Young, smart, makes good coffee, always organized. Aaliyah found Crystal's profile in 2 minutes. Public account, 20,000 followers, bright, provocative photos from restaurants, clubs, expensive trips. A typical Instagram diva. The last post was made yesterday evening. A photo of an elegant hand with a flawless manicure, holding a glass of champagne against the backdrop of a luxury car interior. On the wrist sparkled a gold bracelet with topaz stones. It was impossible to mistake. The caption read, "Bae spoils me. Best night of my life," and the geotag, the same pretentious restaurant where Marcus had taken Aaliyah to propose 5 years ago, the place of their first shared miracle. Aaliyah looked at the screen, and with every heartbeat, the life drained out of her. There was no hysteria, only a cold, deadening realization. She had been betrayed. Not just physically cheated on, which would have been unbearable enough, but betrayed systematically, cynically, intentionally. While she skimped on herself, skipping a new haircut, postponing a trip to see her parents, saving for their emergency fund, dreaming of children, Marcus was buying his Mistress jewelry worth 3 months of her salary. He was spending their joint money to create a beautiful life for someone else. That night, Marcus came home drunk and happy. He stumbled loudly into the kitchen, muttered something about a successful deal, then collapsed in the bedroom. Aaliyah pretended to be asleep, lying in the dark with her eyes open, listening to his even, satisfied breathing. She made a decision. I won't just leave. I won't be a victim. I won't let him trample me. I'm taking back what's mine, down to the last penny. For the next 3 months, Aaliyah lived a double life. By day, she was the model, slightly sad wife who understood everything: the husband's busy schedule, his business trips, the business dinners. She maintained the appearance of a normal family life, cooked meals, cleaned, and even occasionally allowed herself to naively ask how his day went. But as soon as Marcus stepped out the door or fell asleep, she turned into a detective, an auditor, an investigator. She set up her secret headquarters in a small pantry she had converted into a home office. Their entire financial life was in the palm of her hand. She simply hadn't looked closely before, trusting him as the head of the family. Marcus was sure Aaliyah didn't have access to his main accounts. He had changed the passwords for online banking and set up 2-factor authentication. Naive. He forgot that all passwords were stored in an encrypted format in the cloud service, which was accessible from their home tablet lying around in the kitchen. And of course, he didn't guess that Aaliyah had long learned to read him like an open book, by his habits, his gestures, the slightest inconsistencies in his words. Aaliyah began the investigation, methodically and ruthlessly. She opened a new Excel spreadsheet on her laptop and named it balance of justice. She divided it into multiple tabs. Real estate, Marcus official income, Marcus gray income, Marcus personal expenses, Mistress, family expenses, Aaliyah. This was her revenge, calculated to the cent. First, she pulled the history on the mortgage. Marcus loved to repeat, "I pay for the condo. You are nobody here. You have no rights." Aaliyah pulled the old statements. 5 years ago, her beloved grandmother, Nana Rose, passed away, leaving her granddaughter an inheritance of $150,000. It was exactly this money that went toward the down payment for their, as it seemed then, shared apartment. Marcus had convinced her back then not to transfer the money directly to the developer, but to send it to his account so they could pay everything in one transaction for convenience. "Convenience," Aaliyah whispered, staring at the laptop screen. "How thoroughly you thought everything through, Marcus. How intricately you prepared the ground for your future betrayal." She found the bank statement for the month the condo was purchased. Here was the deposit from the sale of her grandmother's estate into her account. Here was the transfer to Marcus's card. And here was the withdrawal from his account to the bank for the down payment. The chain was transparent, but it needed to be notarized, document copies collected and certified. Every step was carefully thought out. Next, the monthly payments. Marcus received an official salary, but Aaliyah, even working remotely, earned money too. Her money, though less, went to food, utilities, clothes, household needs, and small joys. And she had a savings account where the remaining part of her inheritance sat. Every month on the 15th, she transferred a sum equal to the mortgage payment to Marcus. She did this so he would feel like the man of the house who pressed the pay button himself. What stupidity, what a naive desire to support his ego. Aaliyah downloaded all payment orders for the last 3 years. In the memo line for every transfer, she had always written, "For mortgage." It was her intuitive insurance, her little bookkeeping habit, which was now destined to save her. But the most interesting part began when she started digging into Marcus's spending. This part of the work was the most unpleasant, but also the most informative. She knew his official salary was decent, about $150,000 a year. It allowed them to live comfortably, but not rich. However, the spending she saw on his card statements didn't match his official income. Restaurants, boutiques, hotels, expensive gifts, trips. Where was the money coming from? Too much, too often. Aaliyah hacked into his work email. The password was his date of birth, laughably banal. The inbox was clean, but in the trash and archive folders, she found a goldmine. Fake contracts with shell companies, invoices for services that were never actually rendered, emails calculating kickbacks from suppliers. Marcus, using his position as head of sales, was inflating prices for clients, and the difference was sent to the card of a straw man, a childhood friend, who then wired the money back to Marcus as a debt repayment or birthday gift. Aaliyah printed document after document. The schemes were primitive, calculated on the assumption that no one would dig deep. Any tax inspector or auditor would have cracked them in an hour. Marcus hadn't been caught only because the volumes were medium-sized, and he hadn't gotten too greedy until recently. With Crystal's arrival, his appetite grew and his caution dulled. Over the last 6 months, the kickback amounts had multiplied, and it was exactly this money, earned through fraud, that was flying down the drain: gambling. Aaliyah found transactions to offshore sports betting sites, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000. She whispered the numbers, and the hair on her arm stood up. She saw how he flushed amounts down the toilet that could have paid for a renovation, a new car, or started a small business. In 2 years, he had lost over $100,000. That was the price of a luxury car or half a condo in a prestigious neighborhood. That was money he stole from the family, from their shared future, from her, and of course, Crystal. Evidence was everywhere. Tickets to Cabo on dates when Marcus was supposedly on a business trip in Cleveland, payment for a 5-star hotel in Miami, purchases at Saks Fifth Avenue and other expensive boutiques, photos of Crystal wearing these items. By the end of the second month, Aaliyah had a folder 3 fingers thick, tightly packed with printouts, certified statements, screenshots, and copies of contracts. This wasn't just a divorce file. This was a ready-made criminal indictment for Marcus and total moral destruction of his reputation. The work was exhausting. Every evening when Marcus returned home, she had to stifle her rage, pretend, smile. Sometimes she wanted to scream, to drop everything. But then she would remember Crystal's smile, Marcus humiliating her, and she would grit her teeth again. Focusing on the numbers helped. Facts were irrefutable. They were her only support. Aaliyah needed a lawyer, not just an attorney, but a strategist, a person who could present her accounting report in court so that it became a verdict. She needed not just justice, but retribution, cold and ruthless. A friend who had recently gone through a messy divorce herself recommended Mr. Sterling. "He's old school," the friend said. "Looks like a grandpa librarian, gray hair, glasses on his nose, always with a fountain pen. But in court, he tears opponents down to their molecules so there's nothing left. He doesn't take just anyone. He chooses cases that interest him or where he sees deep injustice. But if he takes you, consider it won. He's like an old samurai for whom honor and law are above all else." Their first meeting took place in a small, cozy office in Midtown, piled with leather-bound books from floor to ceiling. It smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. Mr. Sterling, gray-haired with a wrinkled face, cleaning his glasses with a plaid handkerchief, listened to Aaliyah attentively. He didn't interrupt, only occasionally making notes in a notebook with a fountain pen that made a slight scratching sound. His eyes, hidden behind thick lenses, were sharp and tenacious, like an X-ray. When Aaliyah finished her dry, methodical story and laid her thick folder on the table, Mr. Sterling chuckled. He was silent for a long time, turning pages, studying graphs, statements, and copies of contracts. "You know, my dear," he finally said in a creaky voice that seemed to belong to an ancient sage, "usually, women come to me with emotions. He's a scoundrel, he's cheating on me, punish him. But the proof is scarce, just talk. You, however, came with a ready-made indictment, a full package of documents. This isn't just a file, it's nearly a completed sentence." He opened the section on Marcus's financial schemes, carefully studied the wire transfers, checked dates and amounts. His eyebrows shot up, showing genuine surprise and respect. "Are you an auditor?" he asked, looking up at Aaliyah. "Accountant," Aaliyah replied modestly. "A good accountant is worth 10 lawyers, Mr. Sterling chuckled. "There is enough material here not just for the division of assets, but to make your husband change his Armani suit for an orange jumpsuit. Do you want to put him in prison? It is quite possible, you know." Aaliyah thought about it. Revenge was sweet, but she didn't want to be a beast. She wanted to close this chapter of her life, not get bogged down in court proceedings for years. "No, Mr. Sterling, I don't want blood. I don't want my children, if I ever have them, to know that their mother put their father in jail. I want justice. I need my apartment, which I paid for, and compensation for what he stole from me, for what he squandered from the family budget on his vices and another woman. I want him to lose everything he valued so much." "Reasonable," the lawyer nodded. "Anger is a bad advisor. Cold calculation, that is our weapon. Our goal is maximum damage to him with minimum losses for you. So here's the plan. We will file a counterclaim, but we will show the documents only in court at the very last moment. Let him think you are defenseless, that you have no aces. The element of surprise is half the success. He will relax, make mistakes, say too much, act arrogant, and then we will snap the trap shut from which he cannot escape." They prepared for a whole month, rehearsing every word. Mr. Sterling taught her not to react to provocations and to keep a poker face, as he put it. "He will humiliate you," he warned. "He will press for pity, then use fear. He will bring that mistress of his to sting you harder. Your job, Aaliyah, is to be a stone wall. Look at him like empty space. He needs to realize on his own that he is done." Aaliyah memorized this lesson. She wasn't an actress, But these 3 months had made her stronger. She was no longer a naive wife. She was a warrior, and her weapons were numbers. Returning her thoughts to the present, Aaliyah looked at the clock again. It was already past midnight, but she didn't want to sleep. Adrenaline boiled in her blood. She took out her phone and dialed a number. "Mr. Sterling," she said in a steady, calm voice, surprised at her own composure. "He left." "Yes, he is absolutely sure of victory, making plans for tomorrow evening. Yes, I have the folder. Everything is ready until tomorrow." "Good job, Aaliyah." The old man's voice was cheerful despite the late hour. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be a heavy but wonderful day, a day of justice." She put down the phone and for the first time that day allowed herself to smile. This smile was cold, anticipating. Tomorrow Marcus wanted a show. Well, he would get one. A one-man show where the main character would be him and his role, the laughingstock. The morning of the trial was gray. The sky was covered with low leaden clouds. A fine drizzle was falling, but for Aaliyah, it was clear as a spring day. She got up at 6 in the morning, took a contrast shower, washing away the remnants of anxiety and fear. The feeling of water on her skin was refreshing, bringing clarity. She went to the wardrobe. No victim looks, no dark, mournful tones. She put on a strict navy blue sheath dress that fit her figure perfectly, emphasizing her restrained elegance and professionalism. The color symbolized calm and confidence. She pulled her box braids back into a tight, neat bun at the nape of her neck. Minimal makeup, just to hide traces of insomnia, but emphasized the clarity of her gaze. In the mirror, a calm, collected black woman reflected back. There were no tears or resentment in her eyes, only steel determination. "Can you handle this?" she asked her reflection silently. "You are right, and power is in the truth, and in the numbers." She grabbed the folder with the documents, checked for her ID, a pen, and a small notebook. Her bag was strict, businesslike, without unnecessary details. She left the apartment. In the parking lot stood her reliable Honda Civic, bought with her own money before the marriage. Older, but faithful, unlike her husband. She sat behind the wheel, started the engine, and drove out into the gray, but now promising, city of Atlanta. The courthouse greeted her with a hum of voices mixed with the smell of old paper, dust, and cheap coffee from a vending machine near the elevator. Visitors scurried back and forth. Their faces expressed anxiety, hope, or doom. Aaliyah arrived early, as always. Mr. Sterling was already waiting for her at the entrance to courtroom number 4. Imperturbable as a sphinx, as if he had grown roots in this place. "How is the mood?" he asked, shaking her hand. His palm was dry and warm, just like the first time. "Fighting spirit, even eager," she replied. "That is excellent. Remember, not a word without my signal. Let him talk. Every word of his is a nail in his own coffin." They went up to the second floor where their courtroom was located. Marcus was already standing at the doors. He really looked as if he was ready for the Oscars or his own wedding, not a divorce. An ideal dark blue suit, a snow-white shirt, cufflinks gleaming in the dim light of the corridor. He was the embodiment of self-satisfaction. Next to him, clinging to his elbow, stood Crystal. She was 24. But thanks to the cosmetologists, hairstylists, and fashion stylists paid for by Marcus, she looked older and more expensive than she really was. However, you can't buy taste. Her skirt was too short, her neckline too deep for an official government building, and the red lipstick on her full lips was too bright and aggressive. She looked at Aaliyah with a challenge, with undisguised superiority, as if she, Crystal, were the legitimate mistress of the situation, and Aaliyah was an annoying nuisance, a fly that needed to be swatted with a newspaper. She didn't even try to hide her gloating. Seeing his wife, Marcus broke into a wide, predatory smile and moved toward her, pulling Crystal along. He wanted to make a scene, to humiliate her in front of everyone. "Well then," he said loudly, so that the people sitting on the benches waiting for their cases could hear, an elderly woman with a tear-stained face, a man nervously fingering a folder. Came to surrender? Or maybe you changed your mind? Last chance. He stopped a step away from Aaliyah, towering over her. He smelled of expensive cologne, the very one Aaliyah had given him for their anniversary 3 years ago. The scent that used to evoke tenderness and memories of happy days now only caused nausea and disgust. "Today is the best day of my life," he continued, looking her straight in the eye, savoring the moment of her supposed humiliation. "I'm taking everything from you, Aaliyah. The condo, the car, the accounts. You realize you are nobody, empty space. Without me, you're just a gray mouse with a calculator. Who needs you in your 30s? You have nothing except your geriatric lawyer who can't do a thing." Crystal giggled, covering her mouth with a hand boasting a flawless manicure, demonstratively flashing that same topaz bracelet. "Marcus, don't be so cruel," she sang in a sugary, oily voice that had more venom than a cobra's bite. "Maybe let's leave her the old sofa? It doesn't match our style anyway. We ordered that Italian bedroom set, remember? White with gold? That sofa would fit perfectly in her mama's little apartment." Marcus laughed, appreciating the joke. He felt like the master of the situation, the winner. "True enough. Take the sofa. You'll have somewhere to sleep at your mom's place. Actually, no, I'll sell the sofa too. On principle. You won't get a penny. You'll be working until you're old, reconciling debits and credits." Aaliyah looked at them. Not a single muscle twitched on her face, not a single feeling reflected in her eyes. Before, these words would have wounded her to the heart, made her cry, make excuses. Now she heard only empty sound, the noise of wind in her ears. She saw before her not a beloved husband, but an audit object, a distressed asset that needed to be written off the balance sheet of the enterprise called life. She thought about numbers, facts, the flawlessness of her evidence base. She didn't answer anything, just looked right through him with her accountant's gaze, as if reading a bad report that needed to be sent back for revision. She saw right through him, saw his pathetic bravado, his insecurity, which he hid behind arrogance. Aaliyah's silence always irritated Marcus. He craved a scandal, screams, tears. He wanted to see her humiliation, wanted to feed his ego with her pain, but saw only an icy, impenetrable wall. His smile began to slide off his face. Mr. Sterling coughed delicately, attracting attention. "Your self-confidence, young man, is worthy of a better application," he noted quietly but weightily, as if firing a shot. "Save your strength for the courtroom, and your vocal cords, too. You will need them to make excuses, and you will need them very badly." Marcus measured the old man with a contemptuous look from top to bottom, as if at an annoying misunderstanding. "Ah, the defender of the poor and wretched. Get ready to write appeals, Pops. Although they won't help you, I have everything locked down. My lawyer knows the judge personally. They're buddies." "Congratulations," Mr. Sterling replied dryly. "Connections are good, but the law is better, and flawless evidence is a verdict." At that moment, the door to the hall opened, and a clerk with a tired but indifferent face called out, "Plaintiffs and defendants in the case of Thorne versus Vance, please enter the courtroom. Your turn." The courtroom was small, stuffy, and bureaucratic. The worn carpet muted their steps. The rows of wooden benches were hard. On the walls hung faded state symbols, the flag and the state seal, which seemed somewhat alien here. The air was heavy, saturated with the smell of old paper and tense anticipation. The judge, a woman in her 50s with a stern face and a piercing gaze over her glasses, sat in her place. She tapped her gavel and quickly verified those present. Her voice was strict but calm. Marcus's lawyer, a slick man around 40 named Bradley with shifting eyes and a greasy smile, immediately grabbed the bull by the horns. He behaved loosely, feeling the client's support and apparently believing in his own infallibility and connections. He began his speech, pacing in front of the judge's bench, gesturing. "Your Honor," he began in a sugary, staged voice, like an actor on stage. "The situation is extremely clear and banal. This is a typical case where a non-working spouse tries to cash in on the success of her talented husband. My client, Marcus Thorne, is a successful businessman, head of sales at a major company, the primary breadwinner in the family. In recent years, his income has exceeded the spouse's income many times over. The apartment in dispute, a 3-bedroom condo in Buckhead, was purchased with a mortgage, the payments for which were made exclusively by my client from his salary. He paused to dramatically sweep his gaze across the room, trying to find support from the listeners, although there were only a few people. The defendant, Aaliyah Vance, has practically not worked for the last 2 years, engaged in, so to speak, housekeeping. Of course, cooking soup and maintaining order is praiseworthy, Your Honor. But this is not a financial contribution to real estate worth $500,000. We demand a division of property in a proportion of 80 to 20 in favor of my client, or a complete transfer of the apartment to him with a payout of insignificant compensation to the spouse. We also insist that the savings in my client's accounts are his personal funds, earned by backbreaking labor and talent, and are not subject to division. The plaintiff is ready to take on all credit obligations for the car he bought for the family. Marcus sat sprawled in his chair with an arrogant smile, nodding in time with his lawyer's words. He already saw himself as the winner. Crystal, who remained in the corridor, was probably already flipping through furniture catalogs for their new shared bedroom, anticipating triumph. The judge wrote something quickly without raising her head. Her pen scratched on the paper. Then she stopped writing, took off her glasses, and shifted her gaze to the defense. Defense, do you have anything to object? Do you acknowledge the claim? Aaliyah felt her heart beating somewhere in her throat, but outwardly remained absolutely calm. Not a muscle twitched on her face. Mr. Sterling slowly, with dignity, stood up. He adjusted his glasses, opened that thick folder lying before him, and took out the first stack of documents. His movements were unhurried, thorough, as if he were preparing for a complex surgery. Your Honor, the lawyer's voice was firm and resonant. It filled the entire space of the hall, displacing the confident intonations of Marcus's lawyer. We categorically disagree with the plaintiff's position. Moreover, we believe that the plaintiff is intentionally, cynically, and brazenly misleading the court, attempting to misappropriate someone else's property. Marcus snorted loudly, and his lawyer rolled his eyes and sighed theatrically, as if he were bored by the incompetence of his opponent. We have counterclaims, continued Mr. Sterling, completely ignoring the clowns on the other side. And they are backed not by empty words, but by irrefutable documents, certified properly. Let's start with the apartment. My colleague claims that the down payment and mortgage payments were made from joint funds or the plaintiff's funds. However, this is a lie. He took the first document, a thick notarized sheet, and passed it to the judge through the bailiff. He carelessly slid a copy toward Marcus's lawyer across the table, demonstratively not looking at him. Exhibit A bank statement from Aaliyah Vance's account. 5 years ago, 1 month before purchasing the condo, she received an inheritance after the death of her grandmother, Rose Johnson. The inheritance amount, $150,000. The down payment amount for the apartment, exactly $150,000. Not a penny more, not a penny less. This is direct tracing of non-marital funds. The judge took the document, peered at it. Her gaze slid over the lines. She checked dates and amounts. Mild surprise reflected on her face. Continue, counselor. According to family law regarding equitable distribution, property acquired by one of the spouses during marriage by gift or inheritance, as well as property purchased with these funds, is separate property and is not subject to division. This is an axiom of family law. Marcus tensed up. His confidence began to melt. He remembered the inheritance, but he was absolutely sure Aaliyah had just poured it into the common pot, cashed it out, and now the ends couldn't be found. He didn't know about the direct transactions and the exact match of the amounts. But allow me, jumped up Marcus's lawyer, his face no longer looking so haughty. The money was transferred from the husband's account to the developer. This proves his participation, his contribution. Sit down, colleague. Mr. Sterling cut him off without even raising his voice. His tone was calm but categorical. "Don't rush. You are too nervous. Here is Exhibit B." Statement of funds transfer from Aaliyah Vance's account to Marcus Thorne's account on the same day, 1 hour before payment to the developer. The memo line: transfer of separate funds for down payment on condo. Notarized. Every payment has a purpose and a source. Marcus turned pale. His lips trembled. He had forgotten about that memo line or hadn't paid attention, considering it an insignificant formality. "Furthermore," continued Mr. Sterling, not letting him recover, gaining momentum like a heavy but relentless locomotive. "Mortgage payments, yes, they were debited from Marcus Thorne's card. But here is a summary table of funds movement for 3 years provided by the bank, as well as copies of all payment orders from my client." He handed the judge a color chart printed on glossy paper and a thick stack of statements. Every month on the 15th, 1 day before the mortgage debit, Aaliyah Vance transferred from her personal savings account, where the remainder of the inheritance and savings from her freelance work lay, the exact amount of the mortgage payment to her husband's card with the note for mortgage, all 3 years without a single missed payment. This isn't just words, Your Honor. This is a flawless, transparent financial history. The judge carefully studied the printouts, shifting her gaze from the paper to Marcus and back. Marcus's eyebrows crawled up, his forehead covered in sweat. His suit no longer seemed so comfortable. He didn't know this. He never looked at the details of incoming transfers. He just got notifications of balance top-ups and spent the money without thinking. Aaliyah silently transferred money, creating an ironclad evidence base while he played the provider. "Thus," summarized the lawyer, enunciating every word, "the apartment is 95% paid for from the personal indivisible funds of my client. We demand that the condo be recognized as the sole property of Aaliyah Vance. The plaintiff's contribution to this real estate is a statistical error that gives him no rights." Marcus's lawyer looked lost and pathetic. He began to frantically flip through his papers, but there was nothing there except general words, which now seemed like empty sound. "This is manipulation. My client earned huge money. He supported the family. She sat on his neck. This is unacceptable." "Oh, we have reached the most interesting part," Mr. Sterling smiled predatorily. "To income and expenses, to how exactly he supported the family using funds which, according to him, were earned by backbreaking labor and talent." Aaliyah looked at her husband. Marcus turned gray as ash. His hands, lying on the table, trembled slightly. He knew she was an accountant, but he always thought she didn't meddle in his affairs, that she was too stupid for his high matters, that his schemes were too complex for her understanding. He underestimated her. "Your Honor," Mr. Sterling took out the second thicker stack of papers tied with twine. "The plaintiff claims that all money went to the family. However, an unbiased and detailed audit of all his banking transactions for the last 2 years, conducted by my client, shows a different picture. Here is an itemization of Marcus Thorne's expenses for the last 2 years. The lawyer began to read, and every word fell into the silence of the courtroom like a stone shattering fragile glass. Regular transfers to offshore betting accounts. Bet365, DraftKings, offshore casino. Amounts, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000. Transaction dates, paydays, or bonus days, as well as days of large kickbacks. The total amount of funds gambled away in 2 years is $100,000. This is money from the family budget, Your Honor, that was thrown to the wind. Family law implies that the disposal of marital assets happens by mutual consent. Aaliyah Vance did not give consent to lose joint money in gambling." A ringing silence hung in the hall. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall, counting down the last moments of Marcus's self-confidence. Marcus clenched his fist so hard his knuckles turned white. He pulled his head into his shoulders, trying to become invisible. His face was covered in sticky sweat. "But that is not all." Mr. Sterling's voice sounded like a verdict, merciless and final. "Expenses for, let's say, the sweet life and entertainment. Booking rooms in expensive hotels, purchasing jewelry, dinners in luxury restaurants, renting premium cars. The dates of these expenses regularly coincide with the plaintiff's business trips, which he allegedly spent alone. However, here are plane tickets in the name of Ms. Crystal D'Souza, paid for with the plaintiff's card. Here are receipts from boutiques for women's clothing, shoes, accessories. Size small, which in no way corresponds to my client's size. Mr. Sterling held up that very receipt from the jeweler that Aaliyah found in the jacket. And the cherry on top, a bracelet worth $5,000, purchased 3 months ago. A photograph of this bracelet, taken by Ms. D'Souza with the caption, "Bae spoils me, best night of my life," from her personal social media account is attached. The total amount of dissipation on a third party from the family budget, confirmed by documents, is estimated at another $75,000. Total dissipation of marital assets, $175,000. The judge raised her eyes to Marcus. There was not a drop of sympathy in her gaze, only the cold contempt of a servant of the law for a petty but cynical crook. Plaintiff, can you explain these expenses? Do you admit that you spent the family budget on gambling and third parties, damaging the family's interests? Marcus tried to stand up, but his legs wouldn't obey. He leaned on the table, trying to stay upright. These are entertainment expenses, he shouted, his voice cracking into a falsetto. His voice trembled, and his eyes darted. For work! Clients need to be entertained. It's an investment in the company image. Clients are entertained in jewelry stores by buying diamond necklaces? Asked Mr. Sterling dryly with sarcasm, leaving him no chance. And clients sleep with you in the same hotel room in Cabo and wear size small clothing? Do you consider us in the court naive? Marcus's lawyer sat with his head down. He realized his hand was beaten. Moreover, he felt the clouds gathering over him personally. This case was starting to smell very bad, and he didn't want to be involved. One more point, Your Honor. The most unpleasant, but necessary for the full picture, added Mr. Sterling. His voice was lower now, but no less threatening. Aaliyah lowered her eyes. This moment was the hardest for her. This wasn't just about divorce. It was about destroying Marcus's reputation, about publicly revealing his criminal acts. But she understood that, without this, she wouldn't achieve full justice. Aaliyah Vance, as a professional auditor, conducted an analysis not only of personal spending, but also of the husband's financial inflows as they filed joint tax returns, and his real income was known to her. We discovered that Marcus Thorne used his personal accounts to transit funds for the firm where he works. So-called gray schemes, kickbacks from suppliers, laundering funds through shell LLCs. Part of this money settled with him, part went further down the chain. But taxes on these amounts, naturally, were not paid. Here are printouts of his shadow bookkeeping, which the plaintiff carelessly stored in the home cloud. All operations, all amounts, all recipients and senders are indicated. Screenshots certified by a notary. Marcus's lawyer collapsed onto his chair as if he had lost consciousness and covered his face with his hands. He realized this was the end. The case was growing from a banal civil suit into a potential criminal one. His client wasn't just a liar, but a fraudster. We are not asking the court to initiate a criminal case. That is not your jurisdiction, noted Mr. Sterling nobly, but in his voice rang undisguised triumph. These materials have already been handed over to the plaintiff's employer for an internal investigation. But we ask you to take into account that the high income the plaintiff boasts about was partly of illegal origin, and the legal part of the salary went to gambling and a mistress, while the family lived on funds from Aaliyah Vance's inheritance and her personal freelance work. He did not support the family, Your Honor. He bankrupted it. The judge set aside the papers. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. She didn't need to retire to chambers for long. The picture was as clear as day, dirty, vulgar, and obvious. The court is in recess for 20 minutes to issue a ruling, she said, in an icy tone that promised nothing good for Marcus. When the judge left, it became very quiet in the hall. Marcus's lawyer began furiously, angrily whispering something to his client, waving his hands, obviously reproaching him for idiocy. Marcus didn't listen. He looked at Aaliyah. In his eyes was the terror of an animal cornered. He only now realized the scale of the catastrophe. What have you done?" he whispered across the aisle. His voice was barely audible. "You destroyed me. Do you understand what you've done?" Aaliyah calmly gathered her papers into her bag, neatly closed the folder. "No, Marcus, you destroyed yourself. I just balanced the books, debits, and credits, and you turned out to be in a deep loss. You chose where to put your money." The court's decision sounded like hammer blows driving nails into the coffin lid of Marcus's past life. Every point was like a precise shot. 1. The condo at address is recognized as the separate property of Aaliyah Vance and is not subject to division. 2. The claim of Marcus Thorne for the division of the condo is denied. He was awarded the old television and microwave purchased during the marriage with joint funds. 3. The claim of Marcus Thorne regarding the division of funds in accounts is denied in full. 4. The counterclaim for compensation of dissipated marital assets is granted. The court recognized spending on gambling and the mistress as dissipation of assets detrimental to the family. Under equitable distribution laws, the court ordered Marcus Thorne to pay Aaliyah Vance half of the proven squandered amounts. Amount to be collected, $87,500. 5. The vehicle, purchased on credit, remains with Marcus Thorne, along with the obligation to pay the remaining debt to the bank solely, as Aaliyah Vance did not use this vehicle. Marcus walked out of the courtroom on cotton legs. His eyes were empty, his gaze unfocused. He wasn't just bankrupt, he was in a deep, desperate financial hole. He no longer had a condo. He had a huge debt to his ex-wife, almost $90,000, and a car loan he now had to pay himself, unable to sell the car because it was underwater, and not a penny to his name. His head was ringing. In the corridor, Crystal rushed up to him. She was tired of waiting. Her feet in stiletto heels were swollen, and she was irritated. Her pretty face was distorted with impatience. "Well, why so long? We're going, right? I already picked a restaurant. The reservation only holds for half an hour. I'm dying of hunger. What happened with the apartment? Did they give it to us?" Marcus looked at her with a cloudy, dull gaze. He saw not a beloved woman, but one of the causes of his deafening crash. "Crystal, we lost. Everything." "What do you mean, lost?" She froze, her face elongating. The makeup now seemed like a crude mask. "What do you mean, lost? They didn't give us the condo? Well, okay, whatever. We'll rent for now. We'll buy a condo later. But the money, you said there were accounts, millions. We'd live like kings." "No money," Marcus said like a robot. "I owe her almost 90 grand. The judge ruled. The apartment is hers. Everything is hers. I'm broke. I have nothing." Crystal stepped back. Her pretty face twisted, turning into a mask of disgust and open contempt. The mask of love flew off instantly as soon as the smell of money disappeared, as soon as she realized that before her was not a source of goods, but a problem. You owe 90,000? Are you an idiot? You promised me a paradise life, Cabo, diamonds, and a condo downtown. And what do you have? Debts and a box of clothes? You set me up." At that moment, Marcus's phone rang in his pocket. The sharp, cheerful ringtone he had set for his boss sounded like mockery, like a funeral bell for his career. He mechanically took it out with a trembling hand. The screen flashed the name, Mr. Henderson, CEO. Marcus swallowed the lump in his throat that prevented him from breathing and pressed the answer button with a shaking finger. "Hello, Mr. Henderson." The boss's voice was quiet and icy, so scary that even Crystal, standing nearby, heard the intonations and shivered, even though she couldn't hear the words. "Marcus, I just received a very interesting folder of documents via email from your ex-wife. As I understand it, with copies of your wire transfers, fake contracts, kickbacks, and laundering schemes. I spot-checked 2 deals. Everything was confirmed down to the last cent, and even more than I thought." Marcus felt the floor slip from under his feet. The corridor walls began to close in, and the ceiling descended. He was suffocating. "Mr. Henderson, I can explain. It's a mistake. I was set up." "You'll explain to the IRS and the fraud division if I decide to make this official," the boss interrupted, leaving him not the slightest chance for an excuse. His voice was hard as stone. "You stole from me, from the firm. You undermined our reputation. You sabotaged work. You deceived clients. You are fired. Immediately. Security has already blocked your badge and all accounts. Your personal things will be taken to the front desk in a cardboard box. And pray, you son of a bitch, that the full audit we've already started doesn't reveal a shortage greater than what you can cover by selling a kidney. Or you will go to jail seriously and for a long time. And don't dare show up at the office. My driver is waiting for you outside the courthouse to take the company phone and car." Click. The line went dead. Marcus slowly lowered the hand with the phone. His world, which he had built for years on lies and arrogance, collapsed in an instant. Crystal, who heard every word, the speaker was loud, stood with wide-open eyes. Her face went pale. She wasn't too smart, but the instinct for self-preservation in predators works perfectly. She instantly realized standing before her was not a successful top manager, not a generous sponsor, but an unemployed loser with giant debts, no home, and a real prospect of prison. "You were fired for theft?" she asked, and in her voice there was no longer anger, only cold disgust. "Crystal, I was set up. We'll break through. You love me, right?" Marcus began to babble, trying to take her hand, looking for at least some support in this total collapse. She yanked her hand away like from fire, fastidiously brushed off her sleeve as if it had been stained with dirt. "We? There is no we, Marcus. I didn't sign up to live with a broke loser and a convict. You promised me the high life, trips, diamonds. And what do you have? Debts, fired, and a box of stuff?" She snorted, adjusted the expensive purse on her shoulder, and turned on her heels. "Goodbye. Don't call me. I'm blocking you everywhere, and I'm not giving back the bracelet. Don't even hope. I earned it." The clacking of her heels echoed down the long corridor of the courthouse, receding until it fell silent completely. Marcus was left alone, absolutely alone, abandoned, trampled, destroyed. At that moment, Aaliyah walked out of the courtroom. She walked calmly, unhurriedly, with a straight back, holding her lawyer's arm. Mr. Sterling was telling her something, and she was smiling with a restrained, soft smile. There was no triumph on her face, only deep satisfaction and relief. She came level with Marcus. He was standing by the wall, sliding down it with his back, almost squatting, pale, sweaty, crushed. His tie was askew, his suit wrinkled. His once haughty face was now just a mask of fear and helplessness. He raised his eyes to her. In them was a mixture of hatred, fear, and a pathetic, desperate plea. "Aaliyah," he croaked, his voice barely audible. "How could you? I was your husband. You sent the documents to the boss. You destroyed me. I have nowhere to go now. I don't even have money for an Uber. What am I supposed to do?" Aaliyah stopped. She looked down at him, without gloating, without triumph, but also without a drop of pity. It was the way one looks at old, useless junk that has finally been taken out to the dumpster. She saw before her not the man she once loved, but merely the shadow of his deception. "You wanted to take everything from me, Marcus?" she said quietly, but every word fell heavy as a stone. "You said I was empty space. You brought your mistress to court to laugh at me. You thought I was weak because I stayed silent and cooked you dinner. You forgot the main rule of accounting that I tried to teach you. Everything has a cost, and the bill always comes due. Your bill came today, Marcus, and you paid it in full." "But where do I go?" he almost whispered, and finally unconcealed tears sounded in his voice. "I have nothing. Crystal left me." "You have your freedom," Aaliyah replied, shrugging her shoulders as if it were the most obvious answer. You wanted it so badly. You screamed about it. You strove for it, shedding responsibility and moral obligations. And you have the car. Sleep in it until the bank repossesses it. That is your choice. That is your freedom. She turned away and walked toward the exit, where through the clouds a bright, blinding sun finally broke through. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly alive, truly free. The weight that had pressed on her shoulders for years, the heavy, invisible burden of betrayal and lies, was gone. She squared her shoulders. Ahead was a new life. The apartment was her fortress, which no one would take away. Her profession was her support, her shield, and the past remained behind in the stuffy, gloomy corridor of the courthouse, together with the man who never understood who and what he had lost in his pathetic pursuit of a shiny wrapper and fleeting pleasures.